Case study skip trace, Edinburgh, Scotland to Sydney, Australia. Client background. A property landlord in Edinburgh, Scotland, contacted Bond Rees after an ex-tenant disappeared without paying several months of rent. The tenant, who had vacated the property in a rush, left behind no forwarding address and failed to respond to any communication. The client had heard rumours that the tenant may have relocated to Sydney, Australia, but had no concrete information. Frustrated by the financial loss and the tenant's evasion, the landlord engaged Bond Rees to conduct a skip trace and recover the debt. The investigation. Bond Rees began by reviewing the ex-tenant's lease, payment history, and any personal information the landlord had collected during the tenancy. This included the tenant's full name, date of birth, and a copy of their identification, which provided a solid starting point. The client also provided the last known contact information, including a mobile phone number and email address, though both had gone inactive shortly after the tenant vacated the property. Local research in Edinburgh. Our investigators first checked local databases, looking for any recent activity connected to the ex-tenant in Scotland, including financial transactions, utility bills, or property records. However, it appeared the tenant had cut all ties in the UK and had not left a trace of their whereabouts within the country. This confirmed that the tenant had likely relocated abroad, making the international aspect of the case a priority. Cross-border tracing to Australia. Given the client's suspicion that the ex-tenant had moved to Sydney, Bond Rees activated its international tracing network. Our team initiated a search of immigration records and international flight manifests, which led us to confirm that the ex-tenant had indeed travelled to Australia shortly after leaving Edinburgh. Once in Australia, Bond Rees's local team in Sydney conducted an in-depth investigation using a combination of public records, financial data, and employment checks to track down the tenant's new location. We discovered that the ex-tenant had registered for a rental property in the suburbs of Sydney and had recently gained employment in the hospitality industry. Digital tracing and financial profiling. Bond Rees's digital forensics team then analysed the ex-tenant's online presence, including social media activity and digital financial records. While the tenant had attempted to stay under the radar, we were able to uncover evidence of recent transactions, including rent payments and online purchases, which corroborated the findings from our on-the-ground investigation. Additionally, the tenant's email address was still linked to certain accounts, providing further clues about their current activities. Outcome. Bond Rees provided the landlord with a detailed report, including the tenant's current address in Sydney, contact information, and employment details. Armed with this information, the landlord was able to pursue legal action in Australia to recover the outstanding rent. The tenant, now unable to hide, agreed to a repayment plan to avoid further legal complications, allowing the landlord to begin recouping the lost funds. Why Bond Rees? This case demonstrated Bond Rees's expertise in skip tracing across international borders. By leveraging a combination of local knowledge, international contacts, and digital forensics, we were able to track down the ex-tenant in Australia and provide the client with actionable information. Whether it's recovering debts, locating individuals, or pursuing legal action, Bond Rees ensures that no one can simply disappear without consequences.